Sir, shall we start, sir? Madam.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, good evening, one and all, and happy Independence to all of you. The respected President, Dr. Ramakrishnan, sir, the Vice President, Dr. Ramana Nerat, and the senior colleagues, friends, and their students, and the Samanvi Committee, which is headed by Dr. Radhika Reddy, Smita, and Nivedita, Indumati, Preeti Pai, and other colleagues. On behalf of Indian Psychiatrist Society South Zone Branch, I cordially invite you all today's evening guest lecture, which is organized by the IPS South Zone Samanvi Subcommittee, the Women Empowerment Committee, which is on behalf of Samanvi Committee. I welcome you all for today's the special lecture on approach to trauma and abuse in women. As Samanvi is our Dr. President sir has initiated the program. The very actively the all Samanvi team actually the different issues they are addressing from the women issues, social issues, the domestic issues, various cyber crimes. There are various speakers, the eminent speakers being invited and on this platform, and the women empowerment on the issues of women empowerment. They had various topics and eminent speakers are spoken on these different lectures on different platforms. We had given all the and we have the senior psychiatrists like Sarada Menon madam and social activists and all Padmasri. There are various who are working with the women empowerment who are called on this dais. We are giving lecture today. We invite our guest lecturer, Nisha Siriak. He has vast experience in this field. She worked in various capacities in the private hospital, and now she is working in the government institute. And the chairperson of today's Dr. Indu Madam is readily consented to be the chairperson of she is working with the government institute. Now I request our chairperson, our president, sir, Dr. Ramakrishna, sir, to preside over the today's function with his presidential remarks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh. Thank you. Good evening to all of you, and my sincere 75th year Independence Day wishes to all of you and all IPS members and all the delegates and who are participating. Thank you all. Because of the sacrifice of our freedom fighters, we are here what we are. We bow to the nation, we bow to the freedom fighters, we bow to the army, security, border security, all regiments, Air Force, Navy, and all. So with this, I'm happy that we are having this 5th meeting of Samanvi today. It is very active, and I'm very proud that taken all the issues very seriously. And we are not here not talking about psychiatry. We are talking about women's issue. That has been our focus from the very first meeting. We started with Dr. Gauri Devi and Sunita Krishnan. Then we talked about rape and sexual violence. Then we talked about cyber security. Last month, we had a talk about pregnancy and other issues. Now it is about trauma and abuse in women. So it is all very welcome, and I am very happy that this Women Empowerment Committee, Samanvi has taken its branch in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, thanks to Dr. Radhika Reddy and Dr. Nivedita for the initiative. I only wish that all the other 3 states also take up this. And Dr. Indumati and Dr. Smita have taken the initiative to start their branches in the respective states. I'll be happy. So what we have learned from this is we have got now 10 members, women members in our South Zone EC committee. We have tried to enlarge it, 5 members in women Samanvi. Dr. Kasturi has accepted the role of election officer. Then Indu, she is one of the member of the RCBC program, and Dr. Adisha Sharma is part of the publication committee. All these things, it is a positive change, and I hope that you will all fill up more posts in the South Zone as well as in the national IPS. That will be my sincere wish. And I request you all to actively participate, get nominated in your state and zonal elections and occupy senior post. That will be my request. And I'm happy in our Tamil Nadu Executive Council nomination. Many have applied for the executive member post. See, that is a very positive sign. Dr. Indra Sharma was our former IPS president, and so many people like Smita Deshpande, they are taking, and our Dr. Pratima Murthy has taken up leadership, very senior leadership post in our IPS as well as in IMANS and other things. And I request you all to come forward to press upon our needs and rights. Again, this group is about women's rights and empowerment. So that will be my request to all of you. And the topic as such is well chosen: trauma and abuse in women. And every day, if you open a paper, first page will be some violence against women or a child. These are the, and nowadays, this media addiction, one article comes in first 3 pages in national newspapers. And you can imagine how much women are suffering. And you might we heard about Prajanvita from Dr. Sunita Krishnan Padma Awadi, how 25,000 stranded and abused women are under her care. And Dr. Radhika Reddy is doing active work in Andhra. See, these are the things which give some hope for the women folks. And my request will be all IPS members, especially women members, should come forward, involve yourself proactively in your regional areas, whatever NGOs, Rotary, or Alliance, whatever it is, and focus and showcase yourself that you are available for any counseling or any therapy. Unless we present ourselves, people may not be aware. Unless you are socially popular, people will come to you, or else people will not know where to go. Suppose you are a friend to 1,000 people and one of them may contact you for some problem or other. That's how we will be reaching the women community. That will be one thing. Mostly what we find out is about trafficking, forced to for prostitution, rape, and domestic violence. These are the issues. Previously, dowry harassments were more. Now, I think it is a dowry harassment has come down as our women's education has improved and employability and self-reliance has increased. This dowry, this thing is coming down, but violence due to alcoholism are still the same. So these are things I think will be discussed by Dr. Nisha. And most of the things are related somewhere or other it is PTSD. So it is up to us to empower us, empower other women, empower all organizations to come forward to report, and we will have a lobby in our each state legal cell. These are the things which may be a proactive one by the state summonsees and zonal summonsees. That's what I will be requesting. So with these few remarks, I'm very happy that Dr. Indu is again our RCBC member and very active in this thing, and Dr. Nisha. Yeah, she has been holding a lot of posts and has worked in private and public service, and her expertise will give us more light on that. And at this juncture, I would request Dr. Mohandas to have a few words about this program, and followed by Dr. Radhika Reddy to take over.
Yeah, respected IPS South Zone President, President-elect, my dear friends, the Suresh Kumar, Radhika Reddy, and this subgroup, especially the women empowerment, which was initiated by the current president, and Smita, and now Indu is in many committees. They are all from our states. All the best for the hard work, the input that you are putting. And I hope you, as the president has told, you have to take the leadership, not only in the South Zone, by the national, and you have to also see that you will influence the concerned state fellows lobbying around as an advocacy group or expert group, if possible, so that you can really translate whatever you have done through the academics to the betterment of the community. Thank you, everyone, and the best wishes on this Independence Day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request Dr. Radhika Reddy, madam, to take over.
Good evening, sir. Good evening. Dr. Mohandas, sir, Dr. Ramakrishnan, Dr. Suresh, sir, and Indu, madam, Nisha, madam, and all the members of Women Empowerment Committee here. So I wish all the participants also a very happy Independence Day. And it is a privilege that this program has been happening on this day of Independence Day. Because it's a burning topic, and we need to learn about what we have to do regarding these kind of patients and also the cases, and as a moral responsibility in the society. So I wish it's a privilege for me also to introduce the chairperson madam of the PV Indu madam for this session. So let me introduce madam. So it's a very elaborative introduction that please, madam has completed her MBBS and DPM, DNB, MPhil in clinical epidemiology from Government Medical College, Thiruvananthapuram. And she is currently working as additional professor of psychiatry at Government Medical College, Kozhikode. So she, madam has won a number of awards. And out of them, few are Marfati Award for the best paper at 63 annual conference of IPS at New Delhi in January 2011. And the paper was development and validation of the domestic violence questionnaire in married women aged 18 to 55 years. And madam has got the first prize in poster presentation category also, on dementia and cognitive this thing. T.S. Srinivasan Knowledge Enclave, NIMHANS, Bangalore, and 2016. Madam also won the Certificate of Merit for a paper presented on late onset depression as a risk factor for major neurocognitive disorder at Kochi in Social Psychiatry Conference in 2018, very recently. So Madam, currently she is pursuing PhD on major neurocognitive disorders. So Madam is still a student and also a teacher. And she published number of papers in international journals, national journals, and also state journals. And her areas of interest in particularly in geriatric psychiatry and also women mental health and clinical epidemiology. So it's a rare combination like epidemiology and women mental health. So definitely, I think Madam has a lot of experience and lot of knowledge regarding this thing. And I welcome Dr. Indu Madam for this program and to chair the session. And I also welcome Dr. Nisha. Though I don't know her personally, looking at her CV, it's Madam a wonderful speaker and has a lot of knowledge regarding this. So we welcome both of you, Madam, for this session. And I hand it over to Madam Dr. P.V. Indu, Madam.
I'm honored to present this memento to Dr. Indu. Please accept, Madam. It will reach you in another 2 days.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Radhika Madam, for those kind words. Ramakrishnan sir, Suresh Kumar sir, Radhika Madam, Mohandas sir, my friend Smita, and other members of Samani, and Dr. Nisha Suriyak, my close friend. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to chair this session on the trauma and abuse in women. Happy Independence Day to one and all. We are on the 75th day of independence. From 1947, we have reached 2001. But regarding the approach to women, have we advanced a lot? I'm not sure. If you look at the international scenario, if you look at the national scenario, even our state, the plight of women is not much better. Whether you take the countries that are at war, those who bear the brunt of the problem are the women. If you take the national scenario, inter-caste problems, inter-religious problems, the women are the one who bear the brunt of all that. And you take the scenario at home, again, we see a lot of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, the other way that we call it. I have had the good fortune to validate a questionnaire on domestic violence. Various studies had found that the prevalence of domestic violence in Kerala was very high. In the family environment, it was up to 64%. In other states, it was around about 20 to 30%. It was very high in Kerala. I had looked at whether domestic violence is a risk factor for attempted suicide in married women, and I found that it was increasing the risk by almost 3.5 times. Recently, I conducted a survey, a community survey on women during the COVID lockdown. There has been reports of a lot of domestic violence, increase in domestic violence world over during the lockdown. And we found that almost 1 in 4 women had an experience of domestic violence, either physical, psychological, or sexual abuse. And almost 6% had.
Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt. I think there is echo from your side, ma'am. You have joined from 2 mobiles or
maybe
one lap and mobile.
Maybe.
Sorry to intervene you.
It's okay. It's okay. Is there echo now? Echo is there now?
Now it's fine, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So That was a recent study that I could conduct in Kozhikode, and found that it was, or at least 1 in 4 women are having a new experience of domestic violence during the lockdown. So domestic violence is, that is, in the domestic violence refers to a violence in the family setting. But even otherwise, trauma and abuse in the community is rampant against women. So we had the good fortune of Dr. Nisha presenting on a similar topic at our college for our CME. Now I'll be happy to listen to Dr. Nisha Sariak. Can I have the slides or details of to introduce Nisha, or someone else will be introducing her? The speaker, Dr. Indumati.
Smita ma'am might be here.
Okay.
No, ma'am, I'll share that with you. It will be there in your WhatsApp.
If you could share the screen, I can just introduce the details.
1 second. Let me try.
Have you got it? Shall I read?
Smita, I have sent it to you. Just
You can introduce Smita. That will be fine.
shall I do that?
Yes, yes, madam. I think we can. So over to Radhika, madam, to introduce the speaker.
Dr. Nisha. So welcome, Dr. Nisha, for this session. And madam is working as assistant professor in psychiatry in Government Medical College, Kollam. She did her MBBS from Kottayam Medical College, Government Medical College in 1992, and MD from Government Medical College, Kozhikode, 2000, and DNB from the same college in 2004. She joined medical education service in Kerala after working for a while in private institutions too. Since 2010, she's been working in Government Medical College in Kerala. So she has vast experience in both academic side and also in the private hospital institutions also. So I welcome Dr. Nisha for this session, wonderful session on abuse and trauma in women, and how to manage that. That is the main this thing of this session. So I hand it over to Madam, Indu Madam, and that's the introduction, Madam, about the doctor.
Okay. Thank you, Radhika, madam, for introducing the speaker of the day, Dr. Nisha Sariak, Assistant Professor of Psychiatry at Government Medical College, Kollam. I welcome Dr. Nisha, my friend, to take over the session on approach to trauma and abuse in women. Over to Nisha.
On this occasion, I'm very happy and privileged to present this memento, Dr. Nisha. Thank you, madam, for accepting to give a wonderful topic. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, Nisha.
Good evening, everybody, and happy Independence Day to you all. And thank you for giving me this platform, IPS South Zone and Samanway. Thank you, organizers. And thank you, delegates, for being here. I will start sharing the slides. If it is not cannot be seen, please do tell me. Are the slides visible?
Are you able to share?
We are not able.
No, sir.
Not visible.
Madam, if you find it difficult, you send the PPT to us to someone, and I will share from here.
Okay,
Meanwhile,
sir.
you
Thank you, sir.
can give the introductory talk.
Okay. I've sent it to Dr. Smita. I've sent it to Dr. Smita.
Okay, okay.
Got it?
Let me check.
Okay. I had presented, just like Dr. Indu said, I had presented this topic during the CME in Government Medical College, Kozhikode, and I have changed that a bit to suit to this presentation because that was one of the sessions in a one-day CME. So before going into the proper approach, I will give the overview of what I am going to present as definitions, the psychosocial impact of it, how to assess and how to manage, and whether we can prevent domestic violence. And definitions, starting with trauma and abuse. A traumatic event is defined by the DSM as an event that an individual experienced, witnessed, or was confronted with an event or events that involved actual or threatened death or serious injury or a threat to the physical integrity of themselves, and that the individual's response involved intense fear, helplessness, or horror. And abuse is any action that intentionally harms or injures another person, whereas aggression is the behavior that is intended to harm another individual who does not wish to be harmed. Violence is aggression in the extreme, with extreme physical harm, such as injury or death as its goal. Battering is defined as a repeated physical or sexual assault by an intimate partner or ex-partner within a context of coercive control. And when we say gender equality, we refer to equal treatment of women and men in laws and policies, and equal access to resources and services within families and communities, as well as in the society at large. The gender equity is another term and refers to fairness and justice in the distribution of benefits and responsibilities between women and men. And programs and policies that specifically empower women are necessary to achieve this. Gender-based violence. This is the eighth slide. Gender-based violence is violence involving both men and women, and in which the female is usually the victim, and which is derived from unequal power relationships between men and women. And violence is directed specifically against a woman just because she is a woman and not a man, or affects the woman disproportionately. Recently, the word has been expanded to include violence between men and men, between men, that is between two males or between women. And Smita, it will be next slide. And next slide. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Smita. And violence against women is defined as any public or private act. It need not be a public act of violence. It is a gender-based, and it results or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation to liberty. And the deprivation of liberty means the person is not allowed to have friends, not allowed to be on social media, not allowed to go home, not allowed to meet her friends or to call by herself. So intimate partner violence means any behavior or ex-partner that causes physical, sexual, or psychological harm, including acts of physical aggression, sexual coercion, psychological abuse, and controlling behaviors. The definition included ex-partner because whenever a victim tries to leave a person who has been harassing them, usually they again come and harass or cause violence. That's why the ex-partner is also included. It need not be husband, it can be a boyfriend too, or a dating relationship. And domestic violence is used synonymously, but there is a bit difference in the definition between domestic violence and intimate partner violence. In domestic violence, a perpetrator can be not only male, it can also be another female. And the victim is not only female, but could also be children. This is the quote from Sexual Politics by Kate Millett in 1970. She was a feminist, and it was from her PhD thesis, in which the perpetrator says, "No one can see you, no one can hear you. If you escape, no one will believe you." And I think it still holds true. So before going into how to manage, we should know how it affects the victim. So the psychosocial impact. Next slide, please. The psychosocial impact includes the individual as well as social. The individual includes physical and mental health. The social impact includes increased use of health services and social services with loss of productivity. The unemployment and high job turnover are also a problem. So the physical health impairment is very, very obvious. Next slide, please. The injuries can vary from aberrations to neurological injury to spine fracture, fracture of facial bones. It could be multiple unexplained physical symptoms like IBS, stomach ulcers, fibromyalgia, pain syndromes, also bladder infections. The reproductive health is also affected. So resulting in multiple unexpected and unwanted pregnancies, unsafe sexual behavior, resulting in sexually transmitted diseases and risk of HIV, pelvic inflammatory diseases and infertility, the sexual dysfunction, vaginal and anal care, and if the violence occurred during pregnancy, poor antenatal care, miscarriage, stillbirth, premature labor, can occur. And low birth weight is very, very consistent with domestic violence. The maternal mortality is increased due to various reasons. Psychological impact include loss of self-esteem because of repeated humiliation. The different types of anxiety disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorders, the depression and suicidal attempts, substance use disorders secondary to trauma, psychosomatic disorders, pain disorders, and sleep disorders. Even if as a disorder sleep is not there, many of the time the sleep is deprived because of the violence often occurs at night. The mortality is increased because of homicide. More than 50% of women who were killed in the US had reason as domestic violence. Domestic violence was the reason, either by their partner or ex-partner. And suicide is very common. Maternal mortality is also associated because of poor antenatal care and premature delivery and AIDS-related death. So how are we going to assess a person presenting to you with probable domestic violence? And before going to how to assess, the WHO prescribes certain core competencies. One is to respectfully explore the client's personal experience and assess the risk and the severity of the risk. And you should know about the impact on victims as well as trauma-informed work practices and the system in which the victim find themselves, like the judiciary and the law and order. And how do you explore? Most of the time, they don't disclose non-physical violence because it's not considered as important or physical injuries take importance. And an open question with non-judgmental approach often reveal the reason. And you don't have to problem solve for the person. You listen, you believe the person, you communicate that you believe the person is enough. And be clear that abuse, violence, humiliation, or threats are unacceptable in any relationship. And explicitly make it clear that violence and sexual abuse in a relationship are crimes. And the responsibility of the crime remains with the perpetrator, not the client. And the client is in no way responsible for it. And also be aware of your own biases. And how do you assess the risk? And the risk assessment is based on client's assessment, the evidence presented, and your professional judgment. Why is client's assessment important? The victim knows the perpetrator best, not her parents, not her children, not you, not any mental health professional. The victim knows the perpetrator best. So what is and is not safe, she knows. And she will decide when to leave, how to leave, and the plan. The assessment has to be a collaborative process and should support disclosure. And it reinforces the client's wisdom and autonomy. And willingness to believe their experience helps elicit the story. And the evidence include the repeated pregnancies, mental health issues, and level of social isolation. If the person is not allowed to contact anybody or does not have any contacts or friends or family to support them, then think of being a victim of domestic violence. Also assess whether the perpetrator has at any time used weapon and the types of violence committed, whether it was thrashing, hitting, kicking, or has tried to strangulate her, and whether there is any problem in the relationship, any reason, separation, financial problems, or indicators of future harm, especially if there is jumping. And the professional judgment comes in coordinating all these three: observation as to what has happened, the significance of the risk factors presented before you, and the likelihood of escalating violence, and also assessing the risk to children. If the mother is, if the perpetrator is unable to hit the mother, then the children may take the brunt of it. So what is trauma-informed work practices? It aims to relieve symptoms and encourage hopefulness and produce a behavior change positively. The person will have to grieve for losses. A life that might have been, this person has not met the perpetrator, has not married this perpetrator, and what could have been a good life, whether by education, career, or in a peaceful life. And it also aims to relieve post-trauma symptoms and aid personal autonomy. And whenever you deal with a person, you should normalize rather than pathologize symptoms and reaction. That way you normalize means all depressive symptoms, all anxiety symptoms can occur in a person who is a victim of domestic violence. You say what happened to the client, not what is wrong with you. And the symptom relief is less likely while the client is still having or living with the perpetrator. And many women will be diagnosed with psychological disorders or psychiatric disorders, which becomes an impediment in the court, and which can be used by the partners as because she is ill or psychiatrically ill, she does not have the capacity to deal with that, or it is because of that the problems all starts. And the failure to contextualize violence can lead to misdiagnosis, victim blaming, and failure to recognize abuse for the healthcare professional as well as in the court. And whenever communicating, never imply that the victim contributed to violence. Right? Why did you talk to him when he came drunk? Why did you ask this question? You should have prepared all the meals correctly. It's because there was no salt. Something like that. It is not because of any of that. And do not insist that the victim leave the perpetrator, because the victim knows whether how much risky it is. Sometimes it can lead to homicide. And respect the victim's autonomy. Violence is a choice, and that is why victim is in no way responsible for that violence. And whenever an report of abuse is presented, never minimize it and never excuse violence. There are people who come and report that, okay, when the victim says that somebody slapped me, the other side, I just touched the face only. That's not slapping. And she says she had pain. It's not so. And how do you understand the system? Understanding the system means understand the gender role stereotyping and the difference in the power imbalance. In the society, there is always more power is assigned to the males and females as subordinates. The perpetrator used the legal system to further harass and abuse victims. And the dangerous insistence of power and control, that is the central theme in domestic violence. It is not always recognized in courts. And the problem is when the court does not recognize it, the children who are given in the father's custody, they are often killed while they were with their parents or father. So how are you going to manage once you know that the person was victimized? And what is the role? The role of healthcare provider comes because you may be the only person to whom the domestic violence is communicated, because hospital may be the only place that person is allowed to go. The person may not be allowed to go to her own house, her friend's house, not to go to the shops, anything. And it might be the only opportunity to save a life. So awareness, help regarding help and the needed care and support is definitely needed. And you are often the mediator between the the victim and the legal system, and has to communicate regarding the mental status also. The first line support means you have to meet the 4 types of needs of the person: the immediate emotional and psychological health needs, the immediate physical health needs, and the ongoing safety needs. Also the ongoing support and mental health needs. But when you give the first line support, this is the most important care you can provide, and you can contact, and because the person contact with a physical injury. When you meet the emotional needs, the practical needs are automatically met. And the first line support means you can remember it by the mnemonic lives: listen, inquire, validate, enhance the safety, and support the victim. And when you listen, listening helps in emotional recovery. And what do you listen to? Not only just the words, but also the feeling behind the words. You should hear what she's saying as well as she doesn't say. And you should be alert about the body language. And when you communicate, try to sit at the same level and get close enough to show concern and attention to the person. And an empathic understanding of feelings help the person to open up. And there are certain do's and don'ts when you listen. You have to be patient and calm, and do not pressurize them to tell their story. You cannot be distracted. You acknowledge her feeling, and you allow her to tell her story at her pace. Don't say that I have so much patience to just finish it. You give the opportunity to say what she wants, and don't assume or instruct that, okay, this is what you need and you do all those things. You don't interrupt when the person talks, and encourage them to talk, and allow silence when she needs that. You stay focused on her experience and don't say other stories or other stories of domestic violence we know. And always acknowledge her needs and wishes, and that should guide you regarding what is to be done the next. And you inquire regarding the physical, emotional, economic, and safety needs of the person and the concerns as well. And you should also inquire regarding whether she is having any social support. And you phrase the questions as open-ended questions, just like in mental stats examination. You can restate what the person has said. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Just like in mental stats examination, you can restate what she has said and reflect the feelings she has said, and explore and clarify if that is needed, and express the needs and concerns, and then sum up and verify whether this is what she meant. Validating means letting the person know you are listening attentively, that you understand what she's saying and that you believe what she says without judgment and conditions. It's not like nobody says so, nobody does so, husbands don't say so, father-in-law does not do so. It's not like that. They can do and they will. Feelings are normal. It's safe to express them. Don't say don't cry. Don't be angry. Why are you so angry with your perpetrator? It's not like that. It's normal. It is safe to express them with you, and they have a right to live without violence and fear. And validating help them cope with the negative feelings. The feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, the despair they feel, the loss of control and powerlessness, the flashbacks of all the trauma, the denial, and the guilt of, because I didn't do this, that is why he shouted at me. The fear of being attacked with another, again with weapon, the mood swings, and the anger with perpetrator. So how do you enhance the safety of the victim? You have to assess and make future plans. And you have to assess regarding the ongoing situation in every visit. And in case of sexual assault, you have to ask them whether they are at immediate risk again, whether they are safe to go home. And if they are not, it is your duty to refer to safe home, shelter, and police. But I don't know how much is that practical in our setup. I don't find that there is any safe home or shelter or referring to police haven't helped anywhere. The screening questions include whether the physical violence had been escalating over the past 6 months, whether he had ever used a weapon or threatened to use a weapon, whether he had ever strangled you, and do you believe he could kill you? And has he ever beaten you when you were pregnant? And is he violently and constantly jealous of you? And if the answer to any of this question is yes, then the person is at very high risk. And how do you plan for the safety? There has to be a safe place to go. It has to be thought whether she is planning to take her children along with her or she is going to go alone. How is she going to go to the safe place? What about the transport? What will she take with her? She has to take her necessary documents. Once they know that she has left, they will take all of them and burn it away. The money, the keys, the bag, details, all essentials has to be with her. The financial part has to be taken care of. If she is lucky to have somebody to help her who is close by, like if she shouts, somebody will help her that she is good. And never let the partner know at any time unless the person has reached a safe place. So what are the support system available in our country? It could be a helpline, can be support groups, crisis centers, the legal support system, or the mental health professional who can help with the negative emotions or with the psychiatric disorders. So these first line support are guided by certain principles. The first is it is a women-centered care, which means that you are acting in response to her wishes. If she does not want what you're saying or what you are asking her to do, you needn't do that. She needn't do that. If she does not want to record it as domestic violence, you are not going to record it as domestic violence, but provide the best care possible and avoid causing further harm. Keep the confidentiality in all settings, because if the perpetrator ever comes to know that she is trying to escape, then she might be killed. So the two fundamental principles that guide our respect for human rights and promotion of gender equality. All women's rights are human rights and gender equality has to be made. And you have to be aware about violence against women. Don't think that it does not exist. And if the person does not disclose, it is not her fault. She might not be trusting you in the first place because you are a male, or the hospital setup may not be adequate. Maybe because she is ashamed to say that her family is bad, fear of being judged and fear of partner. And the suspect violence against women, if all these things are present, discussed, and if the husband or partner is intrusive, when you are interviewing the person, be suspicious of what happened. And if she misses appointments, then you have to be careful. Also, next slide, please. And if the emotional behavior problem in children are there, which is persistent, like depression, poor scholastic performance, poor concentration, then you have to be very suspicious. WHO does not recommend universal screening, like any person or any female coming with injury. You are not supposed to ask whether it is due to domestic violence. But if you are suspecting, you raise the topic. But when do you raise the issue? When you raise the issue, only when the woman is alone, not even with her parents, not even with her siblings, not even with her child. Only the woman should be alone. Even a child beyond the age of 2 years should not be allowed because that child is able to talk and communicate what was said. That is, so much secrecy has to be kept regarding it because it might be endangering the life of that person. You have to be empathetic and non-judgmental, and culturally appropriate language has to be used. And the language varies between different regions of the same state also. And if it is disclosed, what are you going to do? Whether you document only according to her wishes. You don't document that husband hit her and she developed. If she does not want to document, don't document. But you have to document the health complaints, the signs, symptoms, injuries, and cause of injury. Like now, she was hit with a weapon or just with a weapon. It happened with a weapon like that. The confidentiality has to be kept very close. Not even where there should be a restriction on people who can access the records. And if she is not disclosing, do not pressure her and give details of services available to her when she wants to conduct in an emergency and the probable and possible effects of violence on herself and her children, and insist on regular follow-up. And you do not need to solve her problems. You don't convince to leave the relationship. You don't convince her to make it an MLC. You don't ask much detailed questions about what was happening. You don't ask her to analyze what, why of all those issues. You don't pressure her to tell the feelings and reactions to such an event. And dealing with a victim of abuse is very stressful and can cause trauma. So take care of your own needs. Be sure that you address your needs too. In case of sexual assault, there is additional care that has to be given. If they come within 5 days, you listen, you inquire, you validate, and then you have to follow history and examination and treat the physical injuries and provide emergency contraception. You prevent STD and HIV and should plan for self-care. And history and examination is much as in whenever we see the person on the details of assault and the gynec history has to be recorded. And you assess the risk of STDs, pregnancy, and the mental health also, whether she has severe depression, PTSD, whether she is suicidal. You should seek the permission of the person for examination. And there should always be a female observer to stay with you if you are a male doctor or a male health professional. And for every step, please take informed consent. And for medical examination, for pelvic examination, for collection of evidence, and giving details to police if legal redress is your responsibility. A head-to-toe exam, including the genitourinal exam, has to be done, not to miss out anything. And document everything very carefully, any injury or mark as usual in details. And you should also the treatment provided and also the potential long-term consequences that has been told to that. And the two-finger test has been abolished according to the guidelines, and you should also record the treatment given. So the documentation has to be thorough. So what treatment do you provide? And in extensive injuries, or if there is neurological deficit, a person has a respiratory distress or severe infection, you hospitalize them then and there. If less severe, you can clean and treat with antibiotics, analgesics, injection TT, and probably benzodiazepines also. The problem is when during hospitalization, most of ours are general hospital setup, you need a bystander, even if the bystander may not be willing to stay on. Sometimes it becomes difficult. Emergency contraception has to be given according to the WHO, the person within 5 days after explaining the side effects and with a recommendation to review after next periods or if the periods are. The sexually transmitted diseases has to be treated without, has not to be, no need for confirmation of the illness. You can treat with antibiotics according to the usual protocol, and you have to vaccinate for hepatitis B as well. But for HIV, if they come within 72 hours, you have to test for positivity. And you have to give her post-exposure prophylaxis if she is negative, and with her consent and according to the protocol. And there should be a retest after 3 and 6 months. If she is positive, we give treatment for HIV and care. And according to the WHO, you shouldn't give benzodiazepine to a pregnant woman or for an acute distress. Only short term for adults, and only if the insomnia is interfering with daily activities and psychological interventions are not feasible at the point. And planning for self-care. The victim has to be taught how to care for herself, her injuries. You should also discuss her whatever findings you have found, and you should also tell her the treatment you have given, including that of STDs and HIV, if it is there, and the follow-up visits are a must. The 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. And those follow-up give you an opportunity, opportunity to help her find her way out of trauma. And additional mental health care support. The basic support has to be given for 1 to 3 months, and the first line support of lives has to be given at each meeting, and you shall see improvement of time, and you strengthen the positive coping methods. The availability of social support has to be discussed, and sometimes the problem is it's not at all available. I haven't found that a person or a victim of domestic violence can be sent. Teach and demonstrate stress reduction exercise and follow-up. And what are the positive coping skills? You build on her strength and abilities, whether it is arts, literature, sports, whatever it is, and I'll ask her to continue the normal activities. Help her the activities in which she relaxes and to have a regular sleep schedule. Ask her to have regular physical activity, because inactivity can affect her negatively, and to warn against substance use disorders. And if ever suicide thoughts are there, she has to report back. And what about the social support? The social support, she has to rely on her previous social circle. If it was there earlier, like neighbors, sports, the community, or the religious groups with which she is affiliated, there could be some person who can give her support anonymously. Like one lady told me, the neighbor keeps her attic door open. Her husband does not like to interfere with our family problem, but she always keeps her attic door open. So whenever my husband starts problematic, I just skip the next room. So just such simple things can make her escape that trauma. So case workers, managers are there in the Western countries. We don't have that. The self-help support groups, the vocational or any income generating vocational rehabilitation, if it can be taught, that should be provided. Also, to complete her formal education or informal education to help them to maintain economic independence. So more severe mental health problems, the assessment of mental status, treatment of severe depression, stress reaction, PTSD, assessing the risk for suicide, helping her, which I need not elaborate, all of us are familiar with those. So can we prevent domestic violence? Is there any way you can prevent? WHO says yes, over the long time. The primary prevention is by targeting the younger generation. You encourage healthy attitudes and behavior. You teach them education, you provide them vocational skills so that they are employed, and give them information about substance abuse. These three has been found to be the risk factors for societal risk factors for increased domestic violence. And the social development programs helps to prevent bullying in school. So they already, from the time of childhood, they learn how to be non-violent. So develop social skills so that they interact with each other, with girls or with the females, and how to manage their anger, and how to resolve conflicts without violence, and develop a moral perspective, like what is good, what is not, what is to be done, and not. So parental training to how to train the parents regarding the parenting. Mentoring programs means mentor is a person from outside the family, so that person can have an influence. It could be like another person, another figure. It could be from any official or a local social worker or a service provider. Anybody who can direct the child regarding forward. Family therapy will reduce family issues. House visitation programs for health purpose has been found because they regularly monitor. It might be helpful. In some countries, it has been found to be very useful. And training in relationships skills between the husband and wife, as well as between the parents and children. And if the child is interested or find the talent and join with any of the extracurricular program. The stepping stones and Manas partners, two programs that are there, originated in Asia, and that can be still there. The WHO strategy to prevent violence against women is respect women. Respect is relationship skills strengthened, empowerment, services, poverty reduced, environment made safe, and child and adolescent abuse prevented, and transforming attitude, beliefs, and norms. So relationship, strengthening of relationship between women, between men and women, between men and between the couples inside the marriage, and improve the skills in interpersonal communication, conflict management, and also to share decision making. The shared decision making is important because the husband insists most of the time that they insist like that person will take the decisions regarding the economic trend, and then it does not work out, and then beats up the lady because she's not doing it well. The empowerment of women. Next slide, please. Next slide. So both economic and social empowerment are necessary, and which will include inheritance and asset ownership. The property inheritance is often in names of male in most of the communities, and women are not allowed to inherit property. So microfinancing and how to manage money and gender and empowerment training interventions have to be done. The collective action, if they are like Kudambashree in Kerala, they have done a good work. Mentoring to build skills in self-efficacy, how to assert themselves and how to negotiate and how to improve their self-confidence has to be done. And the different services are police, legal, and health and social services. So what about the police services? The police has to be trained to identify and respond at the earliest sign of a domestic violence or any violent activity. And whenever the victim is brought to the before the law and order, if they how they take the history, they should prevent re-victimization, and they should also get re-offending by the perpetrator. So community policing most often helps in deterring. And you should change the institutional culture also. The all-women police station was suggested for improving because the females found it difficult to get to a police station as listen to the male police there regarding their distress. So, but now it is said that all-women police station are not good, and is now it is considered as both males and females should be involved in policing. So, family counseling cell unit. The National Central Social Welfare Board started it, and at the state level, it is under the Voluntary Action Board. And it is supposed to be under the supervision of professional expert. And the mandate is to facilitate a reconciliation and amicable settlement before a legal action. So its support and maintain the family unit is the aim, and for the sake of the children. So preventive, referral, and rehabilitative services are available to the victims, but nothing is said about the perpetrator or how they have to be helped with. It's not said. That's the disadvantage. The legal and judicial services at the international level, you have different conventions and covenants. At the national level, next slide, please. The criminalizing violence against women, all violence, whether it is intimate partner violence, whether it is marital rape, sexual trafficking, sexual escorting, all of them has to be criminalized. And there should be provision to support and protect the victims, as well as to implement the protection orders. Child protection units have been recommended, and there should be specialized response team to respond if there is a call, emergency call of domestic violence at a place. Women's shelters and family courts are started with this aim, but I don't know, like it is in some way effective. The health services, when they provide telephone hotlines, I don't know whether it is available in Kerala, in South Zone or in India for domestic violence. The easy access to treatment, and it is the right for treatment free of charge. The specialized services to counsel and to support the support groups, like self-help groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, like such support groups of self-help groups for persons who are undergoing domestic violence. Treatment for psychiatric disorders and substance use disorders, programs for sex offenders, and programs for perpetrators. And these last two programs is there in the Western countries. They are group discussions, and in which how they are taught how to control their anger, how to manage it, the gender issues, how to take responsibility for their action as well. Then that has to be found to be very effective. So social services, crisis centers, shelters, safe homes, support groups. There are shelters, Nakia homes available, but I don't know whether it is available for any domestic violence or for an adult female. Usually the local temple of church is what is the nearest available or was nearest available, especially in the village areas where a person can go and stay for night safely. Some NGOs are doing a very good work, and they coordinate the legal and the counseling and advocacy. And so of the respect fee, the poverty reduced. Reducing the poverty by different mothers, whether teaching money management, aiming with starting something that can be started like short-term entrepreneur, something like that, teaching them how to start an account, maintain a savings bank, how to transfer cash, microfinance loans, and how to interfere and have labor force. So there are different national programs to alleviate poverty. Next slide, please. And I think the NREGA is running well, and most of the time it is there. The maternity benefit scheme are also there. The rest of it, I'm not very sure. I think it is there. And a safe environment. Next slide, please. There should be a safe environment. The schools have to be safe. The public spaces have to be safe. The working environments have to be safe. And other areas, wherever you walk, you have to be safe. It should be accessible 24/7 or at all time. Like even we know that most of our hospitals at night, if a woman is walking around, I don't know how much it is. Okay, the child and adolescent abuse prevented. The established nurturing family relationship and prohibiting corporal punishment reduce abuse of children. And Inspire 7 is the WHO strategy for preventing violence against children. That preventing violence against children itself is another big topic. So the next thing is transform attitudes, beliefs, and norms, as I said. The harmful gender attitudes of upholding male privilege and female subordination and justifying the violence against women, and that stigmatize survivors. And there are different beliefs that hold that, okay, you can hit your wife or she deserves punishment. It's because she didn't do something properly. You can hit your wife. So such justifications has to be questioned. The public campaigns, the social media, group education, awareness campaigns, and community mobilization efforts. And communicating campaigns, there is a domestic violence observation day, which is actually November 25th. I came to know about it only recently. It's not being observed in Caroline. And the domestic awareness, violence of the human rights for the 16-day observance is from November 25 to October 1st. It is 16 days. Human Rights Day is October 1st. So such awareness programs helps creating public awareness against it and change the attitude of the public. And in some cultures, public shaming of the perpetrators has been accepted, and the institutional culture and practice have to change. And slogans like, I want to live free of violence, a life free of violence is our right, is such campaigns are also as found to be effective. Next slide, please. This is the overall view of the practices of handling violence by the state as well as the non-governmental organization. Under state, the judiciary, police, and the welfare responses share the responsibility according to the law and order, or whether it is judiciary or it is only the welfare. The non-governmental organization combines it and sometimes advocates and has interactions with the law and order of police and judiciary system. So next slide, please. The principles of good practice. If it has to be effective, no, the presence of a national law, it's not the act of making it criminalizing it. It does not make itself effective. We have Section 490, we have Prevention of Domestic Violence Against Women Act, but if it does not come or act at local level, it is not useful. So every program with project which involves development or implementation should involve women. And the safety of women should be considered in such programs. And the policies and performance of the police, the attitudes, the health, how the professional sees, and it has to be impartial between male and female, that gender equity has to be made. And the different sectors, they have to cover as well as coordinate and thus help in preventing. These are my references. So I think you will make sure that you see them, you hear them, you believe them whenever they approach you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha, for that comprehensive presentation. You have covered every aspect of it. The evaluation of the sensitivity that a clinician has to show towards a woman who presents with features suggestive of domestic violence, how the person has to be evaluated, how the approach to such a patient, the person, what are the steps to be kept in mind, and how that person can be given social support, and even prevention, the legal aspects, how the police can be involved, the role of non-governmental organizations, all this you have touched upon. Thank you for that comprehensive presentation. Now the topic is open for discussion.
Krishnan sir, you would like to make any remarks or any questions?
I would say it's just the need of the hour and comprehensive presentation by Madam. I wish people take it forward and support our women. And I would say it is all about propagating the message. That is very important. Whatever we talk should reach the community oriented approach and education at the root level, panchayat level, all should reach. We should make meetings. Actually speaking, every primary health center has got in Tamil Nadu Tuesday meeting. There, all women employees and PSC workers they were assembled. You have to talk to them. Like that, there are NGOs with the self-employment scheme is there, where people assemble on Wednesdays. That 150, 60 people will assemble for the meeting. You have to address there. See, in that way, from the community, from grassroots level, we have to start. That is another thing. Another thing, we have to make them understand it is your right to express. Don't worry about law. Law is for you. Don't worry about others. Once you are harassed, once you are a victim, if you hide, you are creating one more criminal. See, that should be the attitude where women has to come forward. See, in that way, we have to empower from grassroots to top level. Even in the management, workspace violence, that is again, people are not aware and they don't express. World Bank president, okay, was sacked because a hotel servant reported abuse. Okay, if that can be done, anything can be done, isn't it? So that is the way we have to educate them all over. You have to use social media to the maximum. Everyone are involved in the social media. At least I am in got more than 200 groups. So these type of messages should be put forward everywhere. And daily, status you have got, status upload. Keep something about status. One will see. Someone will see. May not be all will lead it. One lady will lead it. See, that is the way we have to propagate. YouTube, all these things we have to keep loading. Suppose there is a newspaper clip, you talk about the news clip and put in the YouTube. And our Southern branch, we have got a YouTube link. You can put it, you can send it. We will, Southern branch will put the YouTube. We will popularize it. See, then only it will go, because media is the one we have to take maximum advantage. See, that will be my thing. I think she has covered everything. And we have got Dr. Professor Srinivasa Murthy, a legend in psychiatry. He is responded to our invitation and he is here. Sir, Srinivasa Murthy, sir, you will be happy if you can share your wisdom, sir. Has he left?
I think Murthy sir left.
Okay, okay.
Thank you, sir. The valuable points. We could ask Ramana Nerat sir also
Yes,
to
sir. Yes,
contribute.
sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, you are muted, sir. Kindly unmute and
Uh,
yes, sir. Now
Dr.
on.
Nika has extensively gone through the trauma and the physical violence, both at various levels in the society. I think she has done a wonderful job for the evening. That too on an Independence Day about talking about women. She has done a fairly decent job. Well done, Dr. Spiller. Dr.
Thank you.
Anisha.
Thank you. Radhika ma'am, you would like to ask any questions, sir?
There are many questions, some questions in the box, Indumati.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Alok Jyoti has asked, any legal aspects for psychiatrists as per Mental Health Care Act 2017? That is one question. And he also asked, female victims visits male psychiatrist. What should be the approach? These are all the questions I could see in the chat box, ma'am.
Yes, Dr. Nisha, I think you can answer.
Yes, ma'am. I don't think there is anything specific with respect to domestic violence in Mental Health Care Act. But if a male psychiatrist is seeing a female patient, I think it is just like any other person. But if you are going to examine the person, see that there is a female observer with you. Never risk on that, because there had been instances when and the doctor was questioned, doctor was like taken to court or asked by the police, like because of indecent behavior. So it is for the person's own safety. Otherwise, it's okay. I think there is no difference when you evaluate. Sometimes the victim may find it difficult to confide in a male person because whoever she has seen in her life as a male person has not supported her. So over the time, maybe she may not open in the first session, she might open in further sessions. And even if she does not open up, it's not your problem, it's that wish, it's that failure. Because I have found females who has told me, when I first joined, I was like actually shocked. When I joined, the doctor who was there was like very senior, super senior. And I had just passed out from MD. And when patients, the wives of people who came for de-addiction requested to talk with me. And they used to tell me that in spite of being under treatment with the senior doctor for so many years, they have never told him about the violence they experienced at the hands of these people. And maybe that was why he couldn't interfere that the recurrence happened. Maybe we are not aware of it. And we don't suspect.
Yeah, my side. Yeah, there is a myth like women open up with women is one thing. And I found that few of my colleagues sending the female patient to me in this kind of cases, like you can talk better with them. Such kind of thing I observed many times. But it is a myth and it is not true actually.
It's not.
So if a male doctor is also empathetic with that victim and then contribute and listen and assess all those things, that would really help the victim and also give a message that the men are more sensitive to this kind of matters. So this gives a message that men are insensitive to this kind of abuse and women are more sensitive and they listen more. So I request all the doctors to take up this kind of cases and help them out. Not that women psychiatrists only should see this kind of cases. In this platform, I am requesting all the male psychiatrists to help out in this extent. Thank you.
Indumati madam.
Yes,
Madam.
Satish sir.
I am Dr. Satish from Kottayam. And just a recovery from COVID,
evening,
so
sir.
some voice problem is there. Okay, Dr. Nisha, very nice presentation. Systematic way,
Thank
you
you,
test all
sir.
the points. Okay, right, fine. So one thing I would like to add is that you mentioned about the service of the police, advocates, etc. So psychiatrists may be the first expert they are contacting. So police intimation, I don't know whether you have already mentioned, police intimation is also you have to do in the first instance itself. You can continue with the other examination, whether patient needs inpatient treatment, you can give. Plus, so police intimation is very, very important. Otherwise, you also will be an accused. Can be, so that is very important, police intimation. Another thing is about the psychiatric morbidity of the perpetrators. There is no doubt that all the perpetrators should be punished. There is no doubt about it. But there are certain perpetrators may be psychotic, like a delusion disorder or a paranoid schizophrenia, etc. So this is very relevant, especially when suppose that patient perpetrator has a delusion infidelity, and he says he believes that wife is an affair with his own father or his own brother. So that becomes not only a marital issue, that becomes a whole family issue, etc. In such situation, his relatives may be supporting the victim also. So in such situation, we cannot have a divorce and can ask them to live separate, especially the people from the lower socio-economic class. So in situations, the treatment of these sort of perpetrators, that is so important. Nisha already knows that when they are coming out treatment, once punished, there is no treatment. So what happens is that after punishment, they are coming out of the jail, etc., they will be psychotic. So that is treatment of the perpetrators also. Regarding one more thing, that is the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. I think it was enacted in 2005, came in effect in October 1st, 2006, I think. You know anything, or Ramana sir may be knowing something about that act. These are the three comments. Thank you, Nisha.
Sir, but suppose if victim is not willing to go for the complaint, what will be our stance, sir?
We have to report. Whenever there is a injustice you are seeing, there your duty is to report. Police can decide. Police can come and decide. They need not go with that case. In the case of postmortem itself also, whenever doctor thinks in the casualty, body is brought dead, it is a duty of the casualty doctor, if he is not convinced regarding the cause of death, to intimate police. Police can decide. There are, in our case, the police will come and they may get some treatment records about myocardial infarction, etc. They can even dispose the body. We don't have any authority. So it is our duty to just intimate. That is our duty. That is what we have to do. There are instances, one of our former HODs was also troubled. He was also considered as a accused. She has to undergo a lot of legal procedures. So that is very important. You just intimate. It's intimation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir,
Mohan
can I
Prasad.
add something, sir?
Yes.
Indu madam, please.
According to Domestic Violence Act, it is not a must that we should intimate. Unlike POCSO, Domestic Violence Act says that a person who comes to know of domestic violence shall intimate, not, may intimate, not shall. But a police officer who comes to know of it shall act. It's not that any person. So that applies to us, that it is not a must for us like POCSO to intimate. And that is what I understand from Domestic Violence Act. I may stand corrected.
It's what the Domestic Violence Act says.
Sir, you are,
that
Sati,
besides
sir, you are
emergency
muted.
room, I don't know.
Pardon, Nisha?
Sorry, I was
In
not.
the,
Yes, sorry.
in the casualty or in the emergency room, if they come with severe injuries and the wife says that don't intimate, then you are not supposed to intimate. That is what the WHO also says. But often in Kerala, usually we intimate. And because especially if it is assault with a weapon also. What directly comes to psychiatrist is the non-physical violence part.
Okay. Okay.
Nisha, that's why the thing, one professor was, about those details. She was accused because things that the father, 18-year-old girl, father said, we need not intimate to anybody. And he himself said to the politicians that I already told everything to the doctor. So he was also involved in that case. She took I think 3 or 4 hours. She had to spend a lot of money also. I was also involved directly in that to assess her, etc. So to came
Only
etc.
The victim has to say, no other person. The victim says no, and no other person, anybody, not her relative, not her father, not her mother, not her sibling, not her brother, not her advocate, not any of her children or grown-up children or not. If the victim says, we have to intimate. If not, no. Often in our setup also, we often, if something happens, we ask, okay, if there is a male bystander or not, and we communicate to that person. So that is also not good.
I think the safe procedure for us is to report. It is police to decide.
Yes.
The police may not be coming. Police,
As-
usually the police come, usually the lady police officers are coming in sari, civil dress they are coming. Just come, see them, they may leave. So that is always safe for on our side. Many thing happen, if a doctor becomes an accused in a case, that is something is spicy for the newspapers, media, etc. Also. So to be on the safer side. So she has a severe injury, which she may not disclosing initially. Later found that she has a severe injury. Then the usual question asked is, why do you intimate? Just intimate. Them come or not, they can decide. They also know the law. So that's safe for us. I think.
Yes, sir. But to be on the safer side, it is always better, as the orthopedicians and surgeons do, they don't ask for anybody's consent to report. They see things like that, they just report. So it is always safe for us to report. As sir said, at that point of time, the relative, the patient herself might say that, I don't want to report this, I don't want police to know about this. But at a later point of time, their opinion might change. So it is always legally, unlike POCSO, domestic violence, we are need not report. That does not incriminate us. But to be on the safer side, it is always better that we report, just like the orthopedicians and surgeons do. That is a normal procedure. That way, that is better to be on the safer side for us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Madam, one question. I just asked about, is it needed to record the interview? Number one. Number two, to Indi madam, you reported 67% domestic violence in Kerala, which is the most educated state and also a socialist state. How? What is the reason? You just.
Sir, regarding recording the interview, is it voice recording that you have in mind, sir?
Yes, madam.
I don't think we can record the interview without the patient's consent.
No, with consent, we'll get the consent and then record. So
that is not a must, I believe. If
okay.
you have a proper documentation in the OP ticket or the casualty ticket, I think that is enough.
Okay.
Regarding this study, which reported that the domestic violence prevalence was 64%, that was an all India study which was undertaken by, it was a multi-centric study. I was not part of that study. That was a study which was done earlier, and it was 64% in Kerala, which was actually underplayed in that report, because all the other places it was 20 to 30%. The probable reasons for quoting such a high prevalence could be that our women report more, probably. They come out and speak out about this. I also got high prevalence of domestic violence in that study on attempted suicide also. In almost 64% had domestic violence. Another study in spouses of alcohol dependent males, that also the women reported 64%. In the current study, which was undertaken in the community during the lockdown period, actually it is less compared to that. It is 25%. Any single act of domestic violence, 25% is reported. The National Family Health Survey, most recent one, 2019, it was data collection was completed in Kerala, and that reported almost 10% only of any single act of domestic violence. Women experiencing any single act of domestic violence, physical, psychological, or sexual, was found to be almost less than 10%. In my study, it came as around 25%, any act of domestic violence. But I would suggest that there was a gross underreport. Gross underreporting, the social desirability bias might have operated during the interview. So if you ask me the reason for the report of the percentage being higher in Kerala, I would say that one of the main reason is the women do speak out more. I think that is one reason that I can say. And another reason, maybe we have a lot of alcohol dependence. The prevalence of alcohol dependence is very high in Kerala, and domestic violence and alcohol dependence mostly are found to go hand in hand. High association between the two are seen. That is one thing that could lead to increased domestic violence. Hope I have answered your questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. But most of the time, when they come to psychiatrists, that symptom relief, when it is not there, when they are depressed, anxious, when we tell them or when we actually motivate them to come out of it or a complaint against it, it's not possible for them. So it's very difficult. And after that, following it is also a issue. If government sector, ma'am, is there any help? Because the financial freedom is not there, because they won't be able to come for follow up with the private sectors and all. How to go about it, ma'am? Any helpline and private sector, government sectors, is there any specific resources available for this kind of women? Nisha, ma'am?
Nisha,
I don't think, I don't know about anything specific.
I can.
All women who have approached me or communicated with me about domestic violence, they have either found out a way, like most of them had their some property in their name. They just went there and put up a tent and started living there, or a shed with their children, and that's from there they started it. One person left, started rearing, bought one single cow, and with that she started her life. Like that, it's none of them I have found that has gone to any government shelter homes, but the care homes are available. There was an NGO called Adani by Sudakumar teacher earlier. I don't know whether it is functioning now. It was offered. It was in the private sector where it was free. It was free then when I knew about it. And at that time, any person or any female who felt that they were forced to leave their husband's house or their parents' home could run away and just present there and leave there. And that was it. But many a time, I don't know, after that, they didn't help any psychological or psychiatric help at that time. It was some 20 years back, I know about it. I don't know how it is functioning now.
if I could add to that, there are the steps that we can, the advice that we can give. There are women's commission, women's cells active under the social justice department, I believe, and now we have a women and child development department also. So the women's cells are active. We can direct them to the women's cell where the police also is and the legal services authorities are there. In Kerala, we have a KELSA, Kerala Legal Services Authority, and that is at the state level, and at the district level, we have District Legal Services Authority. They provide legal services free of cost to people who need that. So we can direct them to, these are some of the options which I have found, at least some of them could benefit, not all, because mostly because they back off.
Yes.
Even when services are provided, they back off. They don't want to leave their husband.
Yes.
Can I just make some comments?
I was talking about shelter homes.
Can I make some
Yes,
comments?
sure. Please, sir.
Chairperson, can I make some comments, Indu?
Sir, please, sir.
Yeah. Basically, the topic Nisha has done it. It is superb. It's a good theoretical framework. But to translate to reality, as Professor Ramakrishnan has suggested, it has to be communicated to the local areas and the people who really deal with that, the community person, and most important, education, awareness, that you have to go to the grassroots level. Number two, Dr. Sadish has talked about the psychopathology in the perpetrator. I think not only the perpetrator, even the victim, the mental status examination, Nisha has already told that It has to be separately done it before this violence started. So it's a tough nut to crack. I usually inform, document things, and if there's a legal issue, I usually inform the police or the people. Otherwise, I usually get only the opinion from the court. For what you have to understand is, we are only an opinion witness or an expert witness, and otherwise we are nobody. So better to document and do it. But the tragic aspect of the so-called NGOs and many agencies who talk that they will do help, there is no auditing. How they work, what are the facilities? Is there a periodic scanning of the facilities or the services they are providing? And some of the people who are concerned with them, with the agencies, are themselves perpetrators. I don't want to name, and people who advocate, including politicians and political families, they are also perpetrators. That will be a re-traumatizing thing. I don't want to name, I have got umpteen examples. So never believe everyone. Better, first of all, you empower yourself, communicate to the public, as our South Zone president has told that, disseminate the information through social media and others, and gradually people will take to their own hands. But social agencies, NGOs, and basically they get so much fund. I don't want to really talk about the funds, how they get it, and what is the split, how it happens from the ministries. There are politicians involved also. When you go and inspect them, you will see one or two people, but they might be getting money. Sometimes it may not exist at all. So what is important, Nisha, it is you have to really write there. These type of agencies are welcome, provided they do the right services, and they should be open for a inspection or even audit. Audit means not only monetary audit, but even social audit or even the service audit. Otherwise, we will not succeed. And especially when the clients come to me, the couple, very difficult to get the perpetrator to come to you. So there I inform the police or inform the so-called judge advice. That is advice. It would be better if the gentleman also is interviewed, psychologically assessed before we make an opinion from our side. If he cannot opine also, whatever is there, we opine, but we should not say that we are the right person to do it, because in the court of law, the judge will decide. And whether the lawyers, whether the police officers, whether the politicians, their tactics are different. We must be very cautious. We must be very cautious. Never believe them, never get influence from one party or other, because it is very difficult for them to reach me, because I think I might have been one of the persons who would have gone to the family court maximum in Kerala as expert opinion, because I don't really care any advocate or judge or anything. We tell the truth, nothing but the truth, because we are only talking about, we have to document well. I mean, well spoken, you have done a superb thing, but it was time consuming. You have to really cut down. Many of the things were overlapping. If you can have a minuscule version with the bullet points, translate it to multiple languages, it will be good for this group to take into the respective states or respective authorities, and don't say that you have to claim that I have done it. No, you all have
Yes,
done it.
I shall,
All
I
have
shall
done it
translate. I shall
for a
use it.
better cause that will augur well for the South Zone and betterment, empowerment of. I mean, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Regarding laws and other things, forget about the nuances of the law. You are nobody to decide it. You don't have any authorities. Mind you, most of the lawyers do not know Mental Health Care Act. Even they still talk about Indian Lunacy Act, that too also in a quote unquote lunatic way, quote unquote. You can record it, no problem. But the problem is better educate them, educate everyone for a betterment. And don't say that you are the best person. You can make your ideas. Let them decide what is best for the woman, woman's cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Very
Thank you, sir.
valuable points. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
sir. At this juncture, again, I'll request the Samanvi committee to make Mahila legal cell in association with Mahila or international NGOs, that I would say, with a good monitoring system so that legal help can be given. Actually, Tamil Nadu state has got a legal cell which will provide all the support and other things. And Gayatri Jagannath has given a very pathetic statistics. India, 9th most dangerous country for women, ranks 5th for the intimate partner violence. With regard to gender equality, our country ranks the first. We don't want to this first. I think we have to change. Somebody had to start the movement. Maybe someone in some way or other, if it does, it will be a model for all other psychiatrists in our country as well as the international community.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll take this as a concluding remark and a great suggestion. I'll ask Smita madam to take over. Shall we proceed for vote of thanks, sir?
Yes, madam.
Yes,
ma'am.
Dr. Smita, please.
Good evening, all. Before I'm winding up this session, I would like to thank the speaker, Dr. Nisha Syriac, for this very luminous, elaborate talk on the violence, trauma, violence, and abuse among women. And thank Indu PV for chairing the session and giving us with lots of information regarding the same topics. And I would like to thank all the senior colleagues who had contributed in this discussion, especially Dr. E. Mohan Das, Dr. Satish sir, and Ramanan sir, and other all other participants who asked questions and participated in the discussion. And I would like to thank Dr. Ramakrishnan sir and Suresh Kumar sir and all the office bearers of Indian Psychiatric Society South Zonal Branch for providing us this platform to talk about women's issues and discussing about the women's issues and finding out solutions and conducting workshops for women in the name of Samanvi. So thank you for thanks a lot to IPS South Zonal Branch and office bearers. And I would like to thank our own team, Samanvi, Radhika ma'am, Indumati, Dr. Indumati, Dr. Nivedita, and Dr. Preeti for being a very good team and always very enthusiastic and helpful for conducting all the Samanvi activities. And I would like to thank each and every participant who took time and effort to participate in this program and actively participated, discussed the content of the talk. And last but not the least, I would like to thank the technical support team of Atma for giving us all the facilities for conducting this program in this online platform. So I wish you all a very happy Independence Day and a good night. Thank you all. Thank you once again.
Thank you, one and all. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.